name is Kevin and I collect old irons. In a previous video we talked about the flat irons, these being single piece, all metal usually, and they had the problem that the metal handle would be as hot as the metal base. Your hands could very easily get burned. This was prevented by gloves and rags and so forth, although that certainly was not very convenient. There has to be a better way. This is the 1867 patent James Gray iron. It looks like a flat iron from where you are, but there's a latch on the top here, and the top comes off. The user would have several bases on the stove. They're all nice and hot. The handle is not hot. I can put the handle on. It is all metal. There is some transfer of heat to the handle through conduction, but there's very few points of contact. When the base cools down, I can unhook the top, put it onto a different bottom. I can do this without having to change my grip using my rags and gloves and so forth, so it was probably fairly convenient. These are the detachable handle irons. They are an important group and they have a long evolution. The evolution begins in 1835 with William Wilson's patent. What William Wilson patented was an iron that has a handle that fits into some grooves on the base. Now I have found just in using this one, the grooves, if you put them on really well, it doesn't come off very easily. He's rusted and so forth. But they're fairly common as irons. You do see them in antique shops, although usually the handle is rusted to the base, and many people I think buy these not knowing that the handles are originally supposed to come off. Being fairly common, these have a value of maybe 50 some odd dollars if indeed the handle and the base do come apart. As always, there are rare pieces. This is a tailor's iron with a detachable handle. I bought this at an auction in a collector's auction in 2017 for a couple $100. Over the course primarily of the 1860s, reminder the previous iron was 1860s, this is 1865, and no patent holder name that I know of. This one has a hollow handle, holes in that hollow handle, probably so it didn't retain heat too readily, maybe also an improved grip. You can take the handle off using a nail. I can take the nail off and not cutting myself in the process. The handle comes off. I can put it onto a new base. Insert the nail again, keeping in mind the base is hot while I do this. Could not have been too easy. This is an 1862 patent, Joel Webster. A little more intricate. There is a fairly heavy base. The handle has a spring within the wood portion of the handle, so that there is a thumb latch here. There also is a shield. Originally the shield would have had some cork on the top to, again, prevent your hand from getting burned. Fairly intricate, a lot of parts, probably fairly expensive. These 1860 irons were not too common. Values in the $100 to $250 realm. I found this at an auction a couple, 3 years ago for 70 bucks and was very happy. But being cumbersome, they weren't very popular. There was need for something better, and something better is just around the corner. Enter this woman, Mrs. Florence Potts. During the 1870s, 1880s, this woman may well have been the second most famous woman in the world. You could say she was the Betty Crocker of her day, but Betty Crocker is a fictitious person. Florence Potts is real. and she was far, far more famous. What Florence Potts did in 1870 is patented her first of a series of iron patents. The first patent was for this double-pointed design. Most of the subsequent patents were for various improvements on this simple detachable handle. It has a semicircular wood piece on top, so there's no metal sides. There is an insulator within the base. Simple spring device. It goes on and off very easily. And she sold this patent to the Enterprise Manufacturing Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they sold these in the millions. This was the Mrs. Potts cold handle sat iron, which the Enterprise Manufacturing Company marketed with a series of trade cards through the 1870s and 1880s. The card you're looking at here has what I would suspect to be the mother-in-law, and she says, "Oh, you lazy thing, why don't you finish your ironing?" And our attractive housewife here answering, "Ha ha, how funny. I used Mrs. Potts cold handle sat iron and finished an hour ago." You might notice in the background there a couple of flat irons, and in the foreground a Mrs. Potts cold handle sat iron. Let's take a look at the back of one of these cards. Again, Mrs. Potts cold handle sat iron. Advantages: detachable walnut handle, does not burn the hand, requires no holder or cloth, double pointed, 3 irons, 1 handle and stand to a set, best in use and cheap. And then there is a address for the either wholesale or retail distributor for that area. Let's see another one of these. This is a card that shows a foot race between Mrs. Potts and Mrs. Old Iron. Mrs. Potts, you'll notice, very youthful, and by golly, that almost looks like a mini skirt there. Somewhat ahead of Mrs. Old Iron, who is older and raggedy clothing and so forth. And the audience is cheering, "Go ahead, Mrs. Potts, we bet on you," and saying to the other, "Oh, you old humbug, you scorched me many a time." This motif is continued on another card. This card, a 3-color card from some years later, but the same basic scene. Here we have 2 men figures, and the leading one is obviously a Mrs. Potts cold handle sat iron. We might notice that the trail that he's running along is called Public Opinion. The ordinary flat iron far away, and the judge is the whole world. Besides manufacturing a lot of its own irons, Enterprise also sold the license to other manufacturers in the United States, in Europe. There were also companies that copied Mrs. Potts in some manner or another all over the world. Mrs. Potts thus became a very widely known name. However, it's uncertain exactly how much she personally benefited from all this. She sold the patent to Enterprise. Whether she got compensated for the use of her name and her image in all these cards is uncertain. I think this would be a great topic for a master's thesis or a doctoral dissertation. The success of the Mrs. Potts designs prompted other inventors, manufacturers to come up with alternatives, and there are many kinds of detachable handle irons. Dealers ask me exactly what I can say about the unusual types, and I think the best way of understanding that is to have an understanding of some of the common manufacturers, and of which I'll show 4 here. This is the Dover iron from Dover, Ohio. The Dover sat iron. It says "Made in USA" on the base. The base is a solid piece of metal. Inside the handle was a asbestos lining, and that insulated the iron to keep the handle cold. this company eventually marketed the asbestos iron. This is a patent date 1900, so a bit later in the process. Again, asbestos, sat iron. The bases outnumber the handles, and you see these bases for perhaps $1 each in antique shops everywhere. Here is an asbestos sat iron sleeve iron. A couple of other manufacturers. This is the Ober iron from 1887. Ober's in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. And the Ober design, patented on the handle as well, is a very simple, very easy to use design. Ober had a nice stylish eye. All of their irons, and there's quite a litany of both detachable handle and flat irons produced by the company, look very attractive. And as always, sold in various designs. Here is an Ober sleeve iron. Again, the handle goes on very easily. The last of the detachable handle iron manufacturers I will show here is the Sensible. The Sensible has a shield here. There is some insulation on the inside here, asbestos lined, as said on the top. These are patented in this particular one, 1908. There's some earlier patents as well. And as always, a variety of bases. This particular one, again a Sensible style handle, is for polishing. This is called the gem polisher. So these irons have a very extensive record, many types, and maybe the most prolific of the irons that you're likely to see in antique shops. So, thank you for joining me again, and I look forward to seeing you in subsequent videos as we explore some of the other technologies applied to the old irons.